And now we come to the big one, Fire Emblem Awakening, one of the most popular games in the series, arguably the most popular, right next to Three Houses. It's the start of a new era of Fire Emblem that I'm sure most of you are more familiar with than what we've talked about so far. Awakening is also the game that saved the series from certain death.
The previous entries did have their fans across the globe, but sales unfortunately weren't reflecting that, so Fire Emblem was still considered somewhat niche back then. Fire Emblem Awakening was made to be the series' swan song if things didn't improve. If not enough people bought it, 250,000 units to be exact, that was it. The Fire Emblem series was done and Intelligent Systems would lose their beloved franchise. All hands were on deck with tons of veteran Fire Emblem staff members working on Awakening, along with 2 directors this time. The first one is Koei Maeda, who formerly did scenario assistance for most of the other games, as well as directed the prior game to Awakening, New Mystery of the Emblem, and would eventually come back for the Fates titles, which we'll cover in due time. The second director is Genki Yokota, who you may also know for managing the Xenoblade Chronicles series, and would stick around to take charge of all future Fire Emblems to this very day. Designing the game definitely took some thinking. Concepts range from going with a modern day setting to taking place on Mars for some reason, but Intelligent Systems ultimately decided to stick with the traditional medieval feel and try to fuse together the gameplay features that worked best from all of the other Fire Emblem games. The subtitle, Awakening, is meant to represent what Intelligent Systems believed to be the ultimate Fire Emblem. Slap it on Nintendo's latest hardware at the time, the 3DS, and cross everything in their power that Awakening does well.
And did it all pay off for probably Intelligent Systems' riskiest game? Did it bring in enough people to stop the life of the series fading away? I think you know the answer to that.
By 2012 in Japan and 2013 for North America and Europe, suddenly everybody loved Fire Emblem, selling 242,600 copies in Japan just on its opening week, followed by another 180,000 copies in the US's first month. As of December 2019, it has now sold over 2.3 million units worldwide, and frequently seen in online lists as one of the best 3DS games out there. Awakening gathered more newcomers to Fire Emblem with new gameplay features not seen before, offering a more generous experience all around to make them more comfortable, and the franchise was saved. We'll be going over those features later and how much they may or may not impact Fire Emblem veterans as a result, but I certainly recall when Awakening first came out and the Fire Emblem series mysteriously exploded with popularity. I mean, it was huge back then, and the critical reviews at the time were nothing to bat an eye at either. I wouldn't pick up my first 3DS until around 2014, but Awakening wasn't really on my top priority list anyway, partly due to me not having any sort of income in those days, and I was also just more interested in buying other games like Zelda Link Between Worlds and Smash Bros. 4. I didn't get my copy of Awakening until mid-2015 when my then girlfriend bought it for me one day. I can't really remember why she did, but this allowed me to finally give the series a shot with its latest game. At first, I was enjoying myself, but I wasn't quite seeing why it got the overwhelmingly positive feedback that it did. The opening missions gave me an okay idea of what to expect, acting as big tutorials, but the pacing was perhaps a little too slow for my liking, which led me to put the game down for I think half a year before I carried on where I left off in early 2016, shortly before the Fates games arrived. And I don't know what the hell happened, but I started liking the game a lot more than I did at the start. Maybe the tutorials were dying down at that point, or it might have been the support conversations that kept me going, but for whatever reason, I couldn't put the game down. It was incredibly addicting to me, so much so that after finishing Awakening, I felt anxious waiting to play Fates. Bummed out that I had no other Fire Emblem game to tie me over until then because a lot of them were so expensive. Yeah, I did eventually get the Wii U port of Shadow Dragon, but as I stated in my review of the original Fire Emblem, it's not the most ideal version. Awakening was the spark that ignited my enjoyment for these games, as well as put together this Western retrospective years later, and hopefully after watching this video, you may come to understand why.
It's how I started with the series, it's how I'm sure a lot of you started with the series, so time to put my personal history aside and talk about Fire Emblem Awakening and all of its glory. Let's do this, folks.
A mere 2,000 years after the events of Shadow Dragon, our story begins with a vision from our avatar that we can create to our liking. A first for Western audiences, but avatars actually made their debut in New Mystery of the Emblem, which, as I've said in previous videos, is currently Japanese exclusive. Canonically, our avatar's name is Robin, but you are able to change it to whatever you want. I'm gonna be boring though and stick with the default design, probably because I'm so used to it in Smash Brothers, and that's also why I'm gonna choose to be male. Maybe in my next playthrough I'll go female. Anyway, in Robin's vision, we see him or her alongside one of the main characters, Chrom, battling the evil sorcerer Valadar, who ends up defeated, but in a last-ditch effort, Valadar takes control of Robin and pierces a lightning bolt through Chrom's chest while he leaves his guard down. Robin then wakes up in a field somewhere and is found by Chrom as well as his sister, Lissa. Robin seems to have lost all memories, which may have also been why first impressions of this game weren't outstanding to me. But he or she at least remembers Chrom's name and their own. Chrom and his crew are part of a military force called the Shepherds, and once Robin proves they're actually a pretty good tactician, Chrom puts his trust in Robin and offers them to join his ranks, as they defend their home of Elise against their neighbors in Plegia. Later that night, Chrom and Lissa encounter a portal of some kind releasing undead soldiers called the Risen, but following them is a masked individual that rescues Lissa. The savior reveals themselves as Marth, who Chrom believes to be named after the same one from Shadow Dragon, but nobody can decipher that she's obviously a woman. There's barely even an attempt to make her voice sound deeper, but she still looks like a woman anyway without that. Mulan was a more convincing man than this, come on guys. The next day, everyone meets up with Emerin, the ruler of Elise, or Exalt as she's titled, who also happens to be Chrom's and Lissa's older sister, making them royalty as well as shepherds. Robin then gets introduced to the other shepherds, and for a while we're mainly just gathering more allies to defend ourselves against Plegia and their Mad King Gangrel, as he continues looking for the Fire Emblem, which is once again a shield, but this time apparently grants wishes. Needless to say, that's bad news if Gangrel manages to nab it. We do run into Marth a couple more times on top of this, once in a tournament to rule the country of Regna Ferox, and another moment later to warn the shepherds about an assassination attempt on Emerin, orchestrated by Valadar from Robin's vision. Marth claims that he knows what goes on in the future, and proves this by slaying one of the soldiers pulling a sneak attack on Chrom, but another one pops out of nowhere and breaks Marth's mask, giving away that, oh, he's a woman? No!
Wait, you're a woman?
And quite the actress, too. Honestly, I'm surprised you didn't figure it out until just now.
Yeah, don't flatter yourself, sweetheart. You just got lucky because nobody had the brains to put two and two together.
After the battle against Valadar, his soul seems to be stuck in a deep abyss, but is approached by someone who calls themselves the Fell Dragon Grima, and restores Valadar to life so that he can do Grima's bidding. And here's where we head into spoilers, so here's the time code to skip ahead if you don't want to know what happens. With Emerin's life in danger, the shepherds need to escort her somewhere safe, but before they barely even leave the capital, they're told that the Plegians have made another attack on Ilistol, where Emerin does her duties. She then decides to go back to try and parley with Gangrel, entrusting Chrom with the Fire Emblem and taking it to Regna Ferox. Upon making it there, the shepherds are not only told that Ilistol is now fallen, but Emerin has also been captured and set to be executed very shortly. When they head over to Gangrel's whereabouts, the rescue operation seems to go well at first, but his assistant Aversa summons Archer Risens to strike down the Pegasus Knights that were helping us, and with no way out, Emerin sacrifices herself by plunging off a cliff to ensure that the Fire Emblem never reaches Gangrel's hands. We probably could have found a way to do that without you giving your life away, but with her dying words of how war is bad and whatnot, the Plegian soldiers surrounding us have lost the will to fight anymore, as seen in a later chapter when one of them returns. This causes the Plegians to lose morale, making it the perfect time to kill Gangrel, and kill him they do. With the war over, Chrom ascends the throne of Elise as the new Exalt, and gets himself married to either Robin as a female, one of the other lady shepherds, or just some random maiden with no name if he didn't max out any of the other supports. I put Chrom with the character Sumiya for this run, since it was already heavily implied beforehand she had a crush on him, and I genuinely thought they'd make a good couple if their prior conversations were anything to show for it. Now putting Tharja with someone other than Robin, I can live with that. That was all basically part 1 of the story, something short and sweet to get you hooked and have a basic understanding of the characters, kinda like Lynn's narrative in The Blazing Blade, only a bit longer. Thankfully, we also stick with the same cast when the war's over, which after jumping around as often as we did in Radiant Dawn, I'm glad we're returning to form here. In what's essentially the second part of Awakening, 2 years pass and Chrom and his wife have been raising their newborn daughter named Lucina, who bears the brand of the Exalt in her left eye, just like her father. Parenting will have to wait though because a new threat is coming to Elise in the form of Emperor Walhart, or as autocorrect likes to call him, Emperor Walmart, who's already taken over the nation of Valm. This leads the shepherds to seek aid from Plegia, hoping to negotiate with its new king, who turns out to be none other than Valadar back from the dead. But he's generous enough to offer gold, ships, and troops to the shepherds, so all's well and good for now. However, he then introduces us to his Hierophant, who seems to be another Robin. Same look, same name, same everything. Oh wow, so many questions. What does this all mean? What does it say about our Robin? Who are they really? Are they a clone of some kind? Were they really created for evil? Can they be their own person? Will they turn on us at any point? Nope, no time, gotta go now and give Valadar an opportunity to squirm into Robin's mind later to mess with them and spill the beans about them being Valadar's kid. The hell? Luckily, Chrom shows up before Valadar can do any real damage, but more Risen have now been spotted by their camp, which get properly dealt with, but Marth accidentally calls Chrom father towards the end. Obviously, Chrom wants to have a private conversation with her about that, and oh boy, this scene right here is way better than it has any right to be. Marth asks Chrom to look into her eyes where he'll see the brand of the Exalt in her left one, just like his little girl, revealing that the woman standing before us is in reality Lucina all grown up and carrying the falchion that Chrom wields. Chrom comes to realize this and apologizes to Lucina for bringing her a world of trouble, causing Lucina to release the emotions she's been holding back for so long, bursting into tears and hugging her father as they're reunited. As Lucina then talks about this with her mother, she further explains that she's come from a grim future more than 10 years later, where the fell dragon Grima destroyed her world, so she traveled back to the past to try and stop Grima from existing, and if 2 of your units get S-rank supports to become married, their future children will come to help out as well. There's time travel in Fire Emblem now, folks. I should be laughing at the fact this is even a thing, but somehow I don't think it's really that out of place. And I honestly have no idea why that is. It probably helps that it's established around halfway through the game rather than much later, but it also doesn't use time travel as a forced plot device like, say, Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance, where it made the past games completely irrelevant. Also, unlike Dream Drop Distance, Lucina says that she managed to go back in time via magic from the divine dragon Naga, which, okay, you can arguably still see as a cop-out, but it makes more sense than just having that ability without any reason. With time travel being acknowledged, it also makes this earlier scene with Lucina being overwhelmed by her emotions so much more powerful and only gets better upon rewatching it. Although minor nitpick, I personally think it might have been better to show what happened in the future before Lucina had a breakdown to provide more context. But still, I'm playing a Fire Emblem game where the daughter of a main character travels back in time to save her father and the rest of the world. I should be grateful I'm able to take this seriously at all when I really shouldn't. Anyway, with that out of the way, Lucina continues to join the shepherds as they make their way to Valm to learn more about their future, and she tells them that rumors in her time have spread about Chrom falling in battle because one of his allies betrayed him, just like what happened in the opening. Immediately after she says this, Robin starts getting a headache, presumably because a memory comes back or Valadar's trying to take over, and Chrom sees this happening but doesn't suspect that Robin might be the person that kills him, carrying on as if it was nothing. In fact, Chrom, despite being a decent character, is maybe a little too trusting. It's all well and good to put some faith into your friends, but even at the start of the game, he believes Robin and their predicament arguably a bit too quickly, going as far as telling his retainer Frederick to back down for being too suspicious of Robin and doing his damn job. After seeing Robin suffer from headaches a couple of times, one of them just as Lucina was telling Chrom how he apparently died, he should probably be more cautious from now on. But no, he continues to be overly confident in Robin. Jumping the gun a bit, I know this comes more into play later, and Chrom's somewhat justified in trusting Robin, but sheesh man, talk about a good judge of character. Returning to that in a moment, when the shepherds make it to Valm, they meet with a swordswoman called Sayri, who's part of a resistance against Emperor Walmart's empire. After helping fend some of them off, she has an idea to unite the rest of the resistance by waking up Tiki, returning from Shadow Dragon and much older, and also confusing Lucina as Marth for a second. They barely even look alike. Why can nobody distinguish these two? Tiki informs them anyway that they'll need to search for the Fire Emblem's missing gemstones to perform a ritual known as the Awakening to obtain a strong amount of power that can be used to defeat Grima. Crom holds only one of them while the rest have been scattered as Tiki was in her deep slumber. Over time, the Shepherds acquire 4 of the gemstones with betrayal from the Resistance, one of our Ferox companions Basilio getting axed off by Walmart, and other twists and turns along the way, eventually taking on the Emperor himself where they defeat him. As for the last gemstone, Valadar seems to have been guarding it and offers Crom and the Shepherds an invitation to bargain for it. This of course turns into a demand to give Valadar the Fire Emblem, and the Shepherds find themselves in an ambush upon refusing. They fight their way out of it, but just as they make their exit, Valadar takes control of Robin and forces them to grab the Fire Emblem out of Crom's hands. With Valadar in possession of the Fire Emblem and the last of the gemstones set in place, the Awakening is ready to commence. Having seen what just happened, Lucina then draws her sword on Robin because she finally figures out that it's actually them that kills Crom in her future. I make fun of that, but one thing I do like about this moment are the different conversations that play out depending on if Robin married Lucina, or ends up being her mother if playing as a female. If either of those happen, Lucina can't bring herself to kill Robin because she loves them so much. I really like those kinds of little details that encourage replayability and offer some extra character. This is where you can choose to accept or refuse Lucina's judgment, but to break the illusion, it doesn't matter because the outcome is the same regardless. In fact, they do this a few other times in the game, and they almost feel kinda pointless, since you're railroaded to the same path anyway. I'm not sure why we're even given the options. The only choices that do affect anything are right at the end before killing Grima, and one side chapter where you can choose to fight for one of 2 groups of mercenaries, or take on both of them. I think Awakening should have either gotten rid of these choices, or fully commit to them so that we have more reasons to replay the game. Regardless of what you pick when Lucina confronts you, Crom shows up having heard the whole thing, convincing Lucina that he and Robin's bonds are too strong and nothing will happen. The Shepherds then reach the Dragon's Table, the altar where Grima can be summoned, and the nearby brainwashed puppets can be fed to him. There they run into Valadar and Aversa again, who tell Crom and the others that they all secretly planned for them to defeat Emperor Walmart, who also wanted to stop the return of Grima, baiting Elise and Plegia to kill him before he could complete his task. After dealing with more of their troops and stepping further inside the table, the Shepherds catch up to Valadar as he mentions that Robin is really a vessel of Grima, ready to be taken over by the Fell Dragon himself, and we kindly brought Robin to them. As we engage in more battles against Valadar's minions, we finally beat the man himself, but the vision Robin had is now starting to come true, as Crom is struck with their magic. However, not only is Basilio from earlier still alive, thanks to Lucina warning him prior to his life-changing battle, but Robin also seems to have weakened their magic so that Crom can withstand the blow, changing their foretold future. Which I suppose is the reason Crom wasn't suspicious of Robin's headaches, but still, damn man. In addition, one of the gemstones was swapped with a forgery by Basilio, meaning the Fire Emblem won't work even while Valadar's holding it. There's one final stand against the evil sorcerer, but the Shepherds manage to kill him off for good. However, the other Robin shows themselves and reveals that they're really our Robin but from Lucina's future, and it's this Robin that killed the older Crom and became Grima himself. He then proceeded to travel back in time to prevent himself from being erased in the future, filling his present self with all his memories, but Robin's heart was too weak back then, so suffered from amnesia as a result. Robin was supposed to take Grima's place in this timeline, but instead chose to join the Shepherds, leading Grima to use the life force of the nearby citizens to fully resurrect the Fell Dragon. As luck would have it, Robin managed to steal back the Fire Emblem from Valadar, and so they put in the remaining gemstone, completing it and giving everyone a chance to stop Grima once and for all. Before they face him though, they need to speak with the divine dragon Naga to provide the Fire Emblem as proof that Crom is worthy enough to obtain the power to defeat Grima. Since neither Naga or Grima are really gods, we don't actually get that power, but rather unleash the Falchions' true potential. And using it for the final blow will only put Grima to sleep for another millennium as opposed to kill him. The only way they can prevent him from coming back would be by having him end his own life. And with Robin being so closely linked to Grima, they would need to use their powers to essentially keep hitting themselves until they both die. If Grima falls, so does Robin, and Crom naturally is against the idea. With that in mind, the Shepherds come across Aversa one more time and kill her off too. Naga then teleports everyone onto Grima's back to get to his weak spot at the neck. Wait, why didn't she do that before? Grima counterattacks by sapping nearly all of everyone's energy and entraps Robin into a void of darkness. But in true RPG tradition, your friends call out to you and bring you back. Grima throws the last of his flunkies to take us on, and weirdly we don't actually get to fight the dragon, but rather the future Robin, while Grima's just kinda chilling in the background. It's a pretty awesome finale though, and goddamn do I love the song that plays, Id Purpose. It's pretty soothing at the start, but then near the end throws in a remix of the main Fire Emblem theme, which also begins quite softly. But more instruments keep coming in to make it more booming, and I can practically see the composer conducting at this point. For something that was supposed to be the grand finale to the Fire Emblem series, this is a really bittersweet piece. Grima is at last beaten upon draining all of his health, and you're given the option to either have Chrom deliver the finishing blow to put Grima back to sleep, or have Robin give up their own life to kill him for reals. I personally went with sacrificing Robin, but yeah, you can guess what happens. The ties of everyone you met, including people I barely even used in this game, Miri who, may just be strong enough to bring Robin back. As the credits come to an end, Chrom and Lissa do find Robin again after some time, in a similar situation to when they first met, and they're welcomed back with open arms as the war is finally over. I know I just went through a lot of detail with Awakening's story, but this is perhaps one of the simpler narratives in the series, and to me that's okay. Sure, not all of it works, like the Marth disguise we already discussed, but it does its job of attracting newcomers very well, and in my opinion you can have a basic story as long as the cast of characters are interesting enough, and the Awakening crew are some of the most likable I've ever had the pleasure of traveling with. They're full of spirit, optimism, and they're not afraid to be a little humorous here and there. While I do think Chrom can be somewhat too trusting during certain story moments, it's hard to hate the dude because of how welcoming and faithful he is to his comrades. Lucina didn't get much to do at the start, but she really grabbed the spotlight at a couple points during the story, although it was mostly her support conversations that made me like her as opposed to her overall role. You'd probably expect Robin to be a blank slate of a character as a means of reflecting your own personality, but no, they actually have their own personality and are fully fledged out. They're intelligent, they're strategic, a little cocky, making wisecracks, and also very caring towards their friends. Robin being just your generic protagonist was one of the things I was worried about when playing Awakening, and while they probably aren't one of my favorite characters in this game, they still threw my expectations out the window, which is more than I can say for other RPG heroes that are usually nothing more than just avatars. Side characters such as Lissa and Frederick may rely on their particular traits a little too much, i.e. Frederick being almost like a nanny to Chrom, or Lissa being more bubbly and bouncy than your typical princess, but I'd be lying if I said that happens throughout the whole game. Anna's of a similar nature, now being recruitable for the first time in the series, and mostly talking about how much she loves money, but seeing how she's only been a small reoccurring character in these games as a tutorial guide or giving little hints, I'm kind of okay with her Awakening iteration as is. The show stealers for me, however, are some of the recruitable units during their support conversations, but I'd be here all day if I went through every one of them. I'll just say that some of my favorites are Tharja, Noir, No Way, and Donal. Yeah, I like Donal, he's got a good heart. Virion probably would have made my list too, but I actually like him more in Tokyo Mirage Sessions than I do here. We'll come back to the supports in a minute though, because there's more to him than that. I'm also glad to say that as well as having great characters, the voice acting is much better than it was in the Tellius games, even if it mostly consists of Matthew Mercer as Chrom and Laura Bailey as Lucina. There is more voice acting from other characters during text box conversations, but it's usually nothing more than a single word or two when it isn't a grunt or the rare short phrase, "Gods, no, dastard!" It's that sort of thing. And yeah, some players will probably find that a little annoying, but you are luckily able to turn that off if it does. Alongside the voice acting is possibly one of the best looking Fire Emblem games out there, and one of the best looking 3DS games. The CG cutscenes look absolutely spectacular for the system. The 3D feature is surprisingly cool in this game, making the characters, environments, and interface really pop out, and I love the mix of 2D sprites and 3D models. For text box cutscenes, the character portraits are in the foreground to show their expressions, while their 3D models with noticeably no feet are in the background to show their body language. For gameplay, the overhead view portrays each unit as basic 2D pixels reminiscent to the GBA games, but when partaking in battles, the camera zooms into a 3D space as you watch everything unfold. Unlike the Shadow Dragon remake as well, where the different viewpoints would switch between both DS screens, in Awakening, the action all takes place on the top screen, while the map and the character and the battle information are all on the bottom screen, which I think is much better for the eyes. The way battles are visualized is a perfect blend of how the GBA and Tellius games did them, and being able to speed up, slow down, or pause them is a nice touch, even though I'm almost always speeding up the battles. One small addition that was an absolute godsend for me was the ability to instantly turn on and off battle animations by just holding down the L button. I don't know how many people talk about this feature, but I really liked having the option to change on the fly if I wanted more visual flair for a particular battle, and if I'm lucky, get one of those badass as hell looking critical attacks, or if I want them to go by faster because I'm facing a bunch of weaklings. If you want, you can skip watching the enemy's turn entirely by pressing the start button, which is also good if you're restarting a chapter and don't want to see every little step play out the same way as before. The actual gameplay portion is about what you come to expect from Fire Emblem by now, but things just feel much faster and smoother than they did in the previous games. Switching weapons is made easier by tapping the X and Y buttons at the battle forecast, a returning mechanic from the Shadow Dragon remake, as well as seeing all danger zones by pressing the X button. Also similar to Shadow Dragon, each unit can use the new second seals to change to a completely different class. Or it may be that you're at max level and want to stick to your default class, but get yourself more stat bonuses. Skills additionally make a comeback and are just as amazing as they were in the Tellius games, but now you can carry up to 5 of them instead of being restricted by capacity points, and I think they activate more frequently than they used to in battle, but I can't confirm that. In between chapters, the world map even appears again for the first time since Sacred Stones, including skirmish battles to catch up any weaker units or give your stronger ones that little extra boost they need to level up. Also coming back are the Gaiden chapters, now called Paralogs. Only you can choose to do them whenever you want in different spots of the world map as long as you unlock them first. If the Paralogs proving to be too much for you, just leave and come back later. Some Paralogs for whatever reason are only available to play via the 3DS's Spot Pass system, which also gives you extra items, equipment, and troops from past entries. You get more bang for your buck, I suppose, but I don't like how it brings back already defeated villains or characters that were supposed to die in the story as a means of recruiting them to your army. It just feels cheap and thrown together as if all that effort in stopping the villains or the emotional turmoil the shepherds went through was for nothing. But they're optional, I guess, so whatever. There are DLC maps you can purchase as well in case you didn't get enough of the game, some of them providing slightly more story or simple fan service, but others are solely made to make your journey easier, like the Exponential map, where you can get XP faster. Some also let you take on the previous protagonists in the series, but it's only in this card form of sorts, and the character models look nothing like the protagonists anyway, so that's pretty lame if you ask me. The DLC maps, even when available in packs, can be rather pricey, especially when there are so many available, and given how the 3DS eShop no longer lets you put in a specific amount of funds, I don't feel like investing at least $10 just for a few extra maps. The main thing you want to take advantage of for all of these chapters though is the new pairing system. By overlapping one unit with another, they can stick to each other like conjoined twins, and depending on how high their support rank is with each other, can provide a great boost in stats during battle. You'll still get the same boost if you just put the two characters in adjacent spaces, but pairing also lets you swap between the two characters where one can attack and the other can stay behind them and not get hurt, sometimes even nullifying an enemy's attack on their partner. On top of this, there may occasionally be a chance that while pairing, your backup unit will jump in and attack to do extra damage. This was of major help against some of the tougher enemies, but there were a few times where I may want to level up another character by granting them the last hit, only to be robbed by a paired team, and I'm like, oh, I guess they don't get that XP they need. The pairing system all around is, in my opinion, one of the best inclusions the Fire Emblem series has gotten. I can see why some people think it's perhaps a bit too useful, but I always enjoy pure power fantasies in my games anyway, so building up supports and watching those numbers go up as I slaughter my way through bad guys is very gratifying to me, especially when it comes to Donal. Oh, Donal. Okay, so you remember the trainee units we talked about in the Sacred Stones video? The ones that start off really weak but with enough experience can become insanely strong? Donal is probably the poster child for that. You find him very early in the game at a paralog and he sucks big time when he starts. Oh god does he suck, and leveling him up is a nightmare. However, Donal also has the aptitude skill, which increases his growth rate by 20% upon leveling up, and since he can go up to 30 levels instead of 20 like everyone else, with enough battles, Donal becomes one of, if not the most powerful unit in the game. He was so ahead of all of my other units in such a short amount of time that I had to put him in reserve so that the rest had more of a chance to level up, only bringing him back for the last few chapters. And when he has max support with another unit, you can just hear the enemies wetting themselves at that point. And speaking of supports, even after playing the later games and without touching the Japanese exclusives yet, Awakening so far has undoubtedly my favorite iteration of the support system in the entire series. Character interactions are some of the best I've seen in Fire Emblem, as we get to know them a bit more as expected, and they can also be rather funny in places. Granted, not all of them are that interesting, but the majority of them outshine the boring ones. A common criticism between some fans is that the support conversations serve nothing more than just to add comedy, rather than dive deeper into a character's struggles, but I personally don't think that's really fair. It's true that a few conversations don't go much further than just, haha, teehee, look how goofy these characters are, but we don't always need doom and gloom for our characters to be entertaining. Awakening is supposed to be a more upbeat Fire Emblem, again, most likely as a means of reeling in newcomers. I don't see anything wrong with a bit of humor to have a break from the more serious story. The previous games had some lighthearted conversations too, and to say that Awakening supports are all just comedy is something I don't agree with. You do get to listen to what a number of the characters are going through in their minds and what they want to get out of this war. Take the Manakete Noe as an example. She's a kid at heart and wants to do nothing but play childish games and have fun, but because Manaketes can live thousands of years longer than humans, she's also terrified about watching her friends grow old and eventually die. As well as this, Noe doesn't have a single clue where her parents are or if they're even alive, and while she tries to keep her chin up around her comrades, when we see her alone, she's crying her eyes out and calling their names, clearly concealing her emotions in front of others. How can you tell me that's too silly? Don't get me wrong, the support conversations in the older games could also be pretty good, but not only are they much easier to obtain in Awakening, thanks to the pairing system, there's also further motivation with the new S-rank supports. Every unit can only have one of these, and it has to be with someone of the opposite sex. Or in the case of Anna, for example, she can only bond with Robin. But if you keep pairing up units that already have an A-rank support, you can have the two of them marry each other and gain max stat boosts. This in turn unlocks a new paralog where you'll find their kids who've traveled back in time to help their parents prevent a dire future, and they'll join your army if you save them. Yeah, for those who skip the plot synopsis, there's time travel now. It kinda makes sense in context with the story, but the children kick so much ass in battle that you almost forget about it. They inherit skills and growth rates from their parents, already making them fairly decent to begin with, but similar to Donald, albeit not as strenuous, as they earn more levels, they can become so strong that you won't want to use anyone else. Noir, the shy and reserved daughter of Tharja with a lust for blood, was probably my best archer with the voice of Michelle Ruff, as opposed to the other archer with the voice of Michelle Ruff. Cynthia, the daughter of Sumiya, became a near unstoppable flyer with enough training, but I think Severa, the daughter of Cordelia, was the one that dished out the most pain. She's a bratty, spoiled teenager who manipulates others, but damn it, she does her job well. Her paralog was a pain in the ass because she's so hot-headed, charging into a very dangerous path full of insanely annoying enemies, and you have to beat Severa to the punch before she dies. This is all just so she can talk to someone, and it took me nearly 2 hours to clear this paralog. Easily the worst one in the game, but I'm so glad I did it, because she instantly proved her worth in the battlefield when I got her. The paralog with Cherche's kid Jerome wasn't much better since there were so many bridges and small islands. This was clearly made for an army of flyers, and it takes a bit of time to train Jerome himself with good enough stats. But all in all, do not brush S-rank supports and the kids aside, they will help you a lot. And in a way, I have Awakening to thank for introducing me to social simulating aspects in RPGs. Like, I know they existed decades before this game, but I personally hadn't seen anything like it, and one of my favorite things to do in Awakening is build these families of badasses to take on the whole world. Hell, just seeing 2 of my units get together after pairing for so long was enough to stop me from putting the game down because they're sweet interactions, if a bit cheesy now and then. And I'd come to love social simulators even more by the time I started playing the Persona series around a year later. Sadly, since it has to be a man and a woman to get S-rank supports, there are no same-sex relationships that can be formed. I first thought they were gonna go that way with the character Libra, but no, he's just a very feminine-looking man. Oh, they can marry someone that's like double their age or are from the future, but a guy with another guy or a girl with another girl? Ew, gross, get that away from me. Something else to keep in mind is that while you can also have children marry other children, that doesn't create a new line of children where they can get married and so on. It all ends with the first generation. In spite of how great the pairing, support, marriage, and children systems are, however, this does come at a bit of a cost that I imagine a number of hardcore Fire Emblem fans won't be happy with. They all make Awakening possibly the easiest game in the whole series. You thought Sacred Stones wasn't as difficult as the other games? Wait until you play this one. Now that's not saying Awakening is completely void of challenge, it can still throw you off in a few chapters, like the paralogs with Severa and Jerome I mentioned earlier, in addition to the staple pirate ship level I always adore. The opening third of the game may catch you off guard as well if you're not fully paying attention, but like Sacred Stones, you might find yourself breezing through a majority of the later chapters because of how strong your units are by then. It is still possible to see your troops fall one by one if you make a wrong move, but compared to the previous games and the later ones, I rarely felt overwhelmed with my odds. To give you an idea of how much easier Awakening is, I didn't sacrifice a single character to complete a mission. Everybody lived to see the end credits, which should be a surprise given how I've had no problem letting units die in the past to get a move on. I didn't even need to put the game in casual mode, making its series debut. This completely turns off the permadeath system that Fire Emblem's very well known for, and if anybody does die, they won't be gone for good anymore and come back after you finish the chapter. I wouldn't really recommend enabling it though. Yes, permadeath can be frustrating when someone kisses the ground, especially when you're just about to finish the chapter, but it does give me more incentive to really think about my next step instead of just charging without a care in the world like I suspect it feels to play casual mode. Awakening does also have various difficulties like some of the previous games if you want to make your experience more or less intense, ranging from easy to lunatic, and you can unlock lunatic plus if you complete the game on the latter difficulty. But from what I hear, it's utter hell to go through and not in the fun and fair way. Instead of designing the enemy AI to be smarter, it's basically a war of attrition while your opponents gain severely jacked up strength and requires a lot of lucky dice rolls to win. Yeah, no thank you.
Even with its issues, I think the length of this video alone should tell you that I really like this game. It's still my all-time favorite Fire Emblem in the series. It was a great way for me to start, and I definitely believe it'll be the same for you if you haven't tried any of them yet, but don't want to play the older games.
Fire Emblem Awakening truly does feel like a sweet mixture of all the best elements from the previous entries, with a couple of inclusions to make the experience even better. I know that not everyone is going to appreciate stuff like the pairing system or the marriages and child units, waifu emblem as the post-Awakening games are sometimes categorized, but I personally highly enjoyed those aspects, and the replayability to me is raised through the roof because of them. It is a shame though that those things might make some players see the game as extremely overrated, but in my opinion, alongside the fantastic gameplay, a great set of characters, lovely music, and excellent presentation, this is a Fire Emblem game I'm definitely gonna come back to for years to come. Hopefully Awakening will get to see a re-release on Switch someday, but the 3DS is still very much a viable option. Definitely go check it out.
Well, I hope you now understand why I love this game so much, and if Awakening happened to be your first experience with the Fire Emblem series as well, let me know what you thought of it in the comments below. So the next main Fire Emblem video will be on the Fates games, but before we got those, the series received its first spin-off title for the Wii U. Yeah, I know this is the Switch port, but bear with me. Now, the next game we'll be looking at is No More Heroes 3, since it just came out, but once that's done, we'll talk about Tokyo Mirage Sessions Sharp FE. Hopefully I'll see you all again soon, and until then, thank you very much for watching this video. Stay safe, stay healthy, and take care of yourselves. Even with its problems, I think the length of this... It was a great way for me to start, and I definitely believe it'll be the same... But before we got those, Now, the